Hello again, welcome back to the Kay Burley Show. There are doubts over the future of the HS2 high-speed rail network today after the government announced a review into how the project should continue and even whether it should be scrapped. The claims the £55.7 billion budget is spiralling out of control and phase one is still years away from completion. So, should HS2 be scrapped? For more, joined by Joe Rukin, National Head of the Stop HS2 campaign, and Henri Murison, Director of the Northern Powerhouse Partnership. Joe, to you first of all, how are you feeling about it?
Well, it's the review that Boris Johnson said he was going to announce while he was still running for leadership, so we thought it had started a month ago. But to be honest, a review that's conducted by the former chair of HS2 Limited, Doug Oakerby, doesn't really strike us as massively independent, and it's a slight worry that what's happened in the past when the costs have got even more out of control is that they just invent a stack load more unattainable and ridiculous economic benefits. And just, you know, if you look at all the jobs figures that are being put forward right now, for example, HS2 will eradicate unemployment in England. It is absolutely ridiculous, these figures that they're putting forward. But if this is truly a review that is actually a yes or no, we don't know whether we're doing it or not, a review, then they need to stop work now, because irreplaceable habitats, ancient woodlands are being lost now. They need to stop it, not in a couple of weeks, not in a couple of months, not at Christmas. They need to stop that work now. And if they don't stop that work now, and if they don't stop sending out the ridiculous number of possession orders that are going out on phase one, then the idea that this is a genuine review is slightly dubious, to be perfectly honest, Kay.
Henri, what do you think? How are you approaching it? Do you think it's going to be independent enough for you?
No, I mean, we welcome a debate based on evidence, which Joe never likes. So it's no wonder that he doesn't like the review process. So, I mean, we're absolutely clear the arguments that northern businesses, our civic leaders like Andy Burnham, who's been out today, one of our metro mayors, are making, are absolutely well considered and argued. And the point of this project was it was to close that north-south divide. Since it was come up with and began into building, and because some of it is being built, we're building it around Euston. There's work going on at Birmingham, and so the reality is this project. The reality is this project, when it is completed, will make a huge difference to closing that north-south divide. And I'm motivated by the lives of the people whose jobs will benefit from this. In fact, there are almost 10,000 people already working on this project. So Joe can throw as much mud as he likes, but actually the fact this process is going to be undertaken by people who are robust, who are looking at the evidence, means that I assume the arguments of people like Stop HS2 won't get very far because they struggle to make arguments on that basis.
Go on, Joe.
Well, this is it, the idea evidence. Every single piece of international evidence shows that far from being this magic one that's going to cure the north-south divide, it will suck more and more economic activity to London. And Henri tried to set this up as some sort of north-south class war, where the reality is that he is a mouthpiece of the vested interest lobbyists who want to make billions of pounds out of building HS2. Northern Powerhouse Partnership is basically George Osborne's vested interest lobbying cartel. And that's what this is about. HS2 has only ever got this far because it has been lobbied for by the people who want to make money out of building it, and of course the associated land grabs around the stations. And if this review is to be
can I correct those inaccuracies, please? I mean, I'm not going to listen to this nonsense.
No, guys, don't talk over each other, because otherwise we can't hear what you're saying. Joe, just make your point, and then of course you can correct it after that. Henri, Joe, go.
If this review is to be independent, then it has to look back, because the government is saying it's going to be 100 billion now. This 55.7, it is clear that Parliament has been misled. This report has to look at how long Parliament has been misled for, whether or not, as Lord Berkeley has said in the House of Lords, whether or not HS2 is, as we believe, rampant with fraud.
Okay, well, I'm sure you want to come back on that, don't you, Henri?
Well, I mean, there's so much nonsense being spoken. It's hard to rebut all of it. But I mean, the point I'll make in response to Joe's arguments about the fact that people like George Osborne and myself are big supporters of HS2, of course we are, because we're the people who are making the case for it. But the other supporters are the democratically elected leaders of the north of England. So Andy Burnham, I mentioned before, has been on the airwaves earlier today. Judith Blake, the leader of Leeds City Council. People like Nick Forbes, the leader of Newcastle City Council. All these people
are directly elected.
Joe, come on. Henri, go on.
So I mean, So the democratically elected leaders of the north of England are absolutely united in their support of HS2. And so what I would say is that all of those cities that are going to benefit have made really clear the economic damage that will be done if this scheme is pulled. And so what you need to be able to think about really is there are people along the route, and I have not for Joe, I don't have much sympathy, but for the people directly affected, I do have sympathy. But the reality is, if you ask the people who represent and lead the cities who are going to benefit, not just those getting stations, but those getting the benefit of the run-on services, getting the benefits of the additional commuter and freight capacity that HS2 releases, these political leaders are all really, really clear that they want this project to carry on. And the fact that the businesses of the UK, if you've heard today from the British Chambers of Commerce, who represent predominantly medium and small-sized businesses, the Chamber of Commerce in East Lancashire, for instance, that doesn't have a station in its area, but sees the benefit for its businesses. There are lots of people, there are an awful lot of people out there who represent
HS2 contractors, Henry.
No, well, but you know what, Joe? I'm not ashamed of the fact that actually there are lots of SME businesses in the supply chain who are going to benefit. When you criticise, when you criticise the fact there's going to be an economic benefit, you then can't have a go at the fact that small employers who are going to benefit are speaking up for it.
Listen. If you talk over each other, you're on Skype. Technically, we can't hear you. There's no point in doing that. Henry, go.
No, I mean, I'm absolutely proud of the fact that there are lots of small businesses, and I've met some of them, for instance, who are already working on doing some of the work on the project, who are absolutely benefiting communities like in West Yorkshire, which hasn't actually seen any of the building happening. So there is building happening on phase one, but even on phase two, lots of small businesses are benefiting. And Joe doesn't like that because Joe represents a number of disgruntled residents who don't like the fact their house is being built. I don't like that either.
Hold on, Joe, go on.
That's the real agenda.
Go on, Joe.
This is the thing. Right from the start, the people who are behind HS2 and the people who want to make money out of building HS2 try to dismiss all the opposition as, it's all NIMBYs, it's all people who, just don't want it in their backyard. And look at the the Treasury Select Committee, the Public Accounts Committee, the Economic Affairs Committee, the National Audit Office, the Major Projects Authority, all have raised serious problems with this out of control white elephant. And people like Henry and the people who are putting the money into this project and spinning this like out of control just say, no, we're not listening, and they just make up these benefits. Like Henry just said, they're building it. They're not building it, Henry, because HS2 has not got notice to proceed. HS2 was meant to get notice to proceed back in November last year. It was put off to July. It's been put off again to December because it cannot pass the tests. It cannot show that it has management capability. It cannot show that the contracts are affordable, and it cannot show that it has a robust business case. Otherwise, they would be building it. All they are doing now is preparatory work, and that work has to stop now because it is ecocide, it is Treemageddon that is taking place, and HS2 Limited know what's happening. They know there's a chance that the project is going to be cancelled. So what they are doing is that they are causing as much damage and seizing as much property, a lot of it without paying for it, I might add, to try and make it impossible to cancel the thing.
Okay,
and this
Henry.
has to stop, and it has to stop
Henry.
now.
What I'd say is that the Northern Powers Partnership will be doing detailed work, which we'll be submitting to the review. And I would challenge other organisations like Stop HS2 to do the same. So what we're doing is saying that we're absolutely confident in our evidence. We'll present it to the review. We'll make sure that when the chair comes up to the north next week, that we are already starting to make those arguments, because we believe this project is value for money, and in particular it interacts and supports Northern Powerhouse Rail, which is the line from Leeds to Manchester and on to Liverpool, Sheffield and Newcastle, which Boris Johnson committed to support when he spoke in Manchester in his first week as Prime Minister. So when you take together the benefits of HS2 and the benefits of improved east-west capacity, including to places like Manchester Airport, the Heathrow of the North, as well as making sure that we can start to create those bigger travel to work areas, that's exactly what London and the South East benefit from, then you can absolutely debunk the myths that Joe shared this afternoon. Because the point is that if you want to have a decent economy outside London and the South East, we need to start spending more money on infrastructure. That's why the National Infrastructure Commission, who've looked at this, who are independent of government, make exactly the same arguments that I would make this afternoon, which is that in the national interest and also in the interest of those places that have been left behind by much of the economic growth that we have seen in the UK in the last 2 to 3 decades, we absolutely have to do this project. And its full scope, which is building it all the way to Manchester and Leeds, is challenging. And I'm sure there are things we can do to reduce the budget to make sure it's done as efficiently and without the damage that Joe is concerned about, if we can ameliorate those issues. But the principle is we need to be able to run those trains, get that capacity to Leeds and to Manchester. And that's what will bring the real economic benefits that our country needs if we're going to survive whatever the Brexit deal.
Joe?
Well, again, see, this is the thing. The HS2 is not going to deliver these benefits that are being talked out. It's not going to be this magic wand to cure the north-south divide. If you want to, regenerate parts of the north of England, the very, very last thing you want to do is deliver a fast train to London that is just going to suck more economic activity to London. The idea that HS2 is needed capacity is just completely specious, because HS2 delivers capacity where it is needed the least, for the maximum possible cost, decades into the future. It is purely for the intercity business elite. The idea that HS2 frees up capacity on the rest of the network is basically saying, well, every single fast train and semi-fast train on the existing network, we're going to get rid of those, and we're going to slow the rest of the trains down. We're going to leave the towns and cities, the second-tier towns and cities that Henri says this is all for, going to leave those behind just to focus on places like Leeds and Manchester. This is not a progressive system. It is economically regressive, to be perfectly honest. Bafflingly irrational, I believe, is what the Green Party said it was when they said, when they talked about the environmental damage that HS2 can cause. This is simply not necessary. If you want to increase capacity on the railways, there are loads of different things you could do for a fraction of the cost that wouldn't cause anything like the damage in terms of to the environment or to communities. But this is just a big boys' toy that is being supported by people who want to make money out of building it. And that's why the budget is now treble what it was. And people like Henri and the people that he represents don't care about that. They don't care that HS2 has survived a decade of austerity. We've seen cuts across the board since HS2 has been proposed. Yet this project, this fast train for fat cats, has somehow miraculously survived everything that's gone through it. All the independent criticism has just been like water off a duck's back because of the support that it's had from the establishment. And
fast train for fat cats, Henri.
Well, I was going to say, all I would say, I made very clear my point earlier, which is actually that the fares will be the same as the current fares. So the point that this is somehow only for people who can afford something more expensive is just spurious. The argument I would be really clear about is there are new trains, for instance, operating now on the northern network between Doncaster and Leeds, stopping at all the stations between, including one of the most deprived areas in the country. Now, you can only run a certain number of trains on that route because it's the East Coast Main Line. It's also the line that's used by every intercity train, every freight train trying to go south or go north. And the simple point that Joe fails to understand is when we make the case for HS2 and for Northern Powerhouse Rail, we're making sure that we get the right solution, for instance, so that Bradford, for instance, gets the full benefits of that improved connectivity, that places like Darlington, that's not a big city. So it is on HS2. So
Bradford's on HS2 now, is it, Henri?
Bradford is now on HS2. But you build a new line and then you will be able to run compatible services further than those stations like Leeds and Manchester. You'll run HS2 trains all the way to Scotland, where I'm talking to you from now, and you'll run HS2 trains to places like Bradford. That's the point, that you can get that same connectivity. And I think that Joe just doesn't understand the fact that, yes, you do need a new line, but you need a new line to enable you to replace the creaking Victorian infrastructure that this country has. The last time we upgraded the West Coast Main Line, it cost billions, and we had to shut it.
Okay, guys, please don't talk over each other. Joe, which bits is he making up? Joe, which bits do you think he's making?
He's talking over me and he gets to speak again. That's ridiculous.
Henri, goodness.
Well, it isn't fair, is it, Kay? The person who shouts loudest gets more attention. That's not how it works, is it?
Don't tell me how to do the show, Henri. It's fine. You've got equal amounts of time. Actually, I'm keeping an eye on my watch. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Go on, Joe. Why is he making it up? Which bits is he making up?
Well, this idea that HS2 is going to benefit Bradford, for example, because...
No. Which bits is he making up, specifically?
Well, the idea that HS2 is going to benefit Bradford.
Okay, stand by.
He's saying that you'll be able to go to Scotland on the East Coast.
Stand by, please. Thank you. Henri, is it going to benefit Bradford?
It will, yes. It will bring direct benefits to Bradford alongside Northern Powerhouse Rail. If you build those two projects together, then you can make sure the benefits of HS2 go to everyone, not just those on the original route.
See, there you go. No, it doesn't. We need to spend more money. And this is the thing that a lot of these benefits that are being talked about with HS2, you need to spend more money to release those benefits. These are things that, oh, well, if we do HS2, it will allow us to do something else that we could have done already without HS2. And
well, you can't do already, Joe. That's not right. So you can't get the extra number of people south of Leeds without building a train line.
Henry, so Joe's making what up now? What's he got wrong?
So what Joe is misrepresenting is the fact that if you don't have more capacity on the network, the additional services that we need can't run. So yes, you do have to upgrade things like the East Coast Main Line north of York to get trains from Newcastle to get the full benefits of HS2. But if you can't get any more people south of York from Newcastle at the sort of numbers you can without building HS2, that's why people like the North East Chamber of Commerce make a really clear argument that yes, we need to upgrade the East Coast Main Line, which we need to do anyway, and we also need HS2 to go with it.
Okay,
that's a really clear point.
I get it. So Joe, he's saying that we need better infrastructure, and that's what HS2 will mean. And so as a result, places like Bradford will benefit.
Well, no, what he's saying is we need to spend more money on top of HS2 to deliver the benefits that he's talking about, and saying this is why we need HS2. And one of the things
the Prime Minister's also
when he talks about you've done that bit, Henry. When you talk about the idea that HS2 will free up capacity in the HS2 business case, direct from the HS2 business case is £11 billion worth of cuts to existing services.
Okay.
That's over 60 years, and so it doesn't matter what the figure is. The point is, it's a net cut.
Okay.
And that's what freeing up capacity means. It means losing the trains that you already have if you're not on the HS2 line.
Got it. Thank you, Henry. Go.
I always find it entertaining to argue with Joe about this, because the reality is it doesn't correspond to what normal people care about. What normal people want is a better quality train service, and when they turn up, for it to work. The reality is in the north of England, and Joe doesn't live up here where I work every day, along with many of the people I work with, particularly our politicians who are very much making the same arguments today and have been for years, is that people at the moment have got creaking infrastructure. So the East Coast Main Line, when something goes wrong, when there's bad weather, right, it just breaks because it isn't fit for purpose. It can't really cope with the number of trains we're trying to run. And that's not the fault of Network Rail, actually. Network Rail have probably maxed out what you can do with the existing infrastructure. We've just had a load of upgrades to the East Coast Main Line. We previously, a decade ago, did the West Coast Main Line. The number of additional services you can now get onto those pieces of infrastructure is very limited based on the kind of historical constraints of having to use a railway that basically was the one the Victorians built. Now, what we are saying really clearly is we do need a new line from east to west, which people like Joe Rukin also criticise, because actually we shouldn't be against building new train lines in this country. That, Henry? We could be you say you don't like Northern Powerhouse Rail because it uses parts of HS2, and you don't believe that anything good can come of anything that uses HS2 infrastructure. You've said that lots of times, Joe, because you can't accept the fact that the north of England has come up with a plan for its transport itself, democratically, which involves using HS2 and Northern Powerhouse Rail. That's what's in the TFN, Transport for North Strategic Plan. Who do you represent, Joe? You don't represent anybody apart from, to be fair, some very unhappy people who are losing their homes. And I sympathise with them. I don't sympathise with you.
Interest lobbyist. Don't talk to me about representing people. You are a vested interest lobbyist. You are paid directly. That's how Northern Powerhouse Partnership exists. It is paid from the firms that will benefit, well, partially from the firms that will benefit from HS2. And you've done it again. This is not a north-south class war. This is a rich versus poor class war. And this is what HS2 is. It is for the richest in society, and it is for the big companies to rake in billions of quid. And all the arguments that you've made are just window dressing to try and prop up, to try and hide away from the reality of this. The reality is that the rest of the network will suffer as a result of HS2. And you said, we're almost, the idea that this Victorian infrastructure, you know what, I was on a Roman road earlier and it wasn't full of pack horses and oxen. The idea that we've got creaking Victorian infrastructure, the Victorians did not run 125-mile-an-hour electric trains.
Okay.
Right.
Henry, hold on. Henry, come back on that point. I'll come back to you in a second, Joe. Henry, come back on that point.
I'll come back on that point really clearly, which is that the railway in the north of England, we've not built, for instance, major new infrastructure. In London, there has been new rail lines built, Crossrail's been built, HS1's been built. And then suddenly, when it comes to the north of England getting some new infrastructure, lots of people think it's a bad use of money. The reality is we've been waiting for this. And IPPR North this week have published very compelling research, which
Okay.
shows really clearly the disparity, for instance, in what's spent between Yorkshire and London. It's, I think, 7 times more
There you go, Joe.
in London.
Joe,
I think that is I don't think that's a class war.
in
That's a
London.
fundamental unfairness.
Yes,
Okay, go.
absolutely. And HS2 is about getting to London. You know, you go look at Leeds, right? Does HS2 go to Manchester from Leeds? No. Does HS2 go from Newcastle or York to Leeds? No. Does HS2 even go from Sheffield to Leeds? No. Where does it go to from Leeds?
It does,
it goes to London.
You can use Northern Powerhouse rail trains on HS2 tracks.
We
services between Sheffield
spend
and Leeds.
more
That's just wrong.
spend more money on something else that you need to make HS2 work, because it's such a terrible idea, Henry. And that's your answer to everything. Just chuck more money at it. It's not my money, it's the taxpayers' money. I'll be all right, because I'll be making money out of it. It's your answer to everything. Chuck more money at it. And the problem is that the vast majority of rail users are not the intercity business elite. They are short-distance commuters.
Okay.
And the rest of the rail network will suffer as a result of HS2 for 2 decades. This is going to hog the entire infrastructure budget. And all the other railways are saying they're in trouble.
Got it. Thank you. Henry, come back on that.
Thanks, Kay. I appreciate. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I'll be really clear that I work with business people. They're all very united. Joe doesn't like that. Local chambers of commerce, he doesn't like that either. But the people who represent Northerners, those people who lead our great northern cities, who came together to make the argument for east-west transport and for north-south, shouldn't have to choose. And I don't think residents should have to choose either, the passengers that Joe talks about. Joe, the Prime Minister has said that he believes that going east to west is a priority. So the point is that that's now a statement of fact. There is going to be a line from Leeds to Manchester which improves connectivity. If you're going to get the real value out of that new Leeds to Manchester line, using HS2 and connecting it with new east-west infrastructure and the existing rail network, we can demonstrate, using Transport for North's plans, we can bring real benefits to the north. And to be honest, Joe can shout all he likes, Kay. He can say really rude things about me on the television. That's up to him. The reality is, and that's personally frustrating, but the reality is the public will benefit from a better set of infrastructure. And if the naysayers want to keep shouting, they can shout all they want, but this review will be evidence-based, and I hope they ignore people like Joe.
I'm afraid we've finished shouting for the day, guys, because you're going to both have to give way to the Prime Minister. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme this afternoon. Thank you. I think you need a little lie down after that.
I think the claim that HS2 will heal the north-south divide is a massive overstatement. If we look at what's happened in other countries, Spain, France, South Korea, where these kinds of high-speed lines have been introduced, that simply hasn't happened. What's more likely to happen is that it will attract further people to work in London from an even wider distance, and it will enable firms in London to serve markets in the regions much more easily. So most of the advantages of this investment will accrue to London and the South East rather than to the regional cities.